Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
We take the source material you need to master and dive straight into the crucial nuggets of knowledge.
And today, we're tackling the absolute core of cellular energy, the citric acid cycle.
That's right. Whether you call it the TCA cycle, the Krebs cycle, or simply the metabolic engine, we're using a chapter from Harper's Illustrated Biochemistry to get a deep, step-by-step understanding.
We want to know how this pathway works, why it's regulated, and, what happens when it goes wrong.
If you imagine metabolism as the energy grid for the human body, the TCA cycle is the massive central power plant. It's located in the mitochondrial matrix, and it serves as the final common pathway where almost every major fuel, carbohydrates, fats, proteins, is channeled.
They all arrive at the mitochondria, and one way or another, they get converted into acetyl-CoA to enter this cycle.
What's fascinating here is that we're looking at the core engine of aerobic life, but its role is so much wider than just, breaking down fuel.
It is. Yes, the central job is catabolic, oxidizing that 2-carbon acetyl-CoA all the way down to CO2. Right. In the process, it strips off these high-energy electrons, stuffing them into coenzymes like NAD+ and FAD.
And those coenzymes then zoom off to the electron transport chain to generate the vast majority of our ATP.
But here's the critical thing to understand. The cycle is amphibolic.
Amphibolic, okay.
Yeah, it sounds technical, but it's a brilliant description of its design. It means it is both catabolic, so breaking down fuel.
And anabolic.
And anabolic, exactly, synthesizing new compounds. It's the place where we don't just generate energy, we also pull building blocks for glucose synthesis, for fatty acid creation, and for amino acid construction.
So it's not just a furnace, it's also a factory.
A factory that knows how to self-regulate. It prevents an energy crisis while providing materials for growth.
And if this central power plant goes down, the effects are, well, they're immediate and they're severe.
Absolutely. The source really emphasizes this. The central nervous system, for example, is highly dependent on an uninterrupted ATP supply from this cycle.
So any defect is a huge problem.
A huge problem. Genetic defects in the enzymes, even if they're rare, lead to profound neurological damage. And look at advanced liver disease like cirrhosis. The massive loss of those hepatic cells, which are metabolic regulators, compromises this central pathway, leading to system-wide failure. We'll definitely get back to that when we talk about ammonia.
Okay, that sets the stage perfectly. Let's move into the fundamentals. We're talking about an 8-step cycle in the mitochondrial matrix.
Right.
What are the starting ingredients, and what's the catalytic secret that allows this machine to just keep running?
Well, the cycle starts with acetyl-CoA, that's our 2-carbon fuel unit, joining forces with a 4-carbon compound, oxaloacetate, or OAA.
Okay.
They combine to form citrate, the 6-carbon molecule that gives the cycle its name.
And the secret?
The secret is the OAA. Over the rest of the cycle, we release those 2 carbons we just added as 2 molecules of CO2, and that 4-carbon OAA is completely regenerated.
So OAA is like the catalytic vehicle.
It is. You only need a small quantity of it to continually oxidize a large incoming flow of acetyl-CoA.
That makes OAA sound like a reusable piece of specialized equipment. But wait, if OAA is completely regenerated, why do we need special anaplerotic reactions to fill it up later? Are we constantly losing OAA somewhere else?
That is a great question, and it gets right to the heart of that amphibolic nature we just mentioned.
Okay.
The only reason the cycle ever slows down or needs replenishment is because we keep pulling OAA and its subsequent intermediates out for synthesis, to make glucose, for instance.
So for just burning fuel, it's totally catalytic that's not consumed.
Correct. For the purpose of oxidizing fuel, OAA acts catalytically.
Okay, so let's talk about the payoff. We know glycolysis gives us a pretty measly net of 2 ATP. What is the total energy yield from one single turn of the TCA cycle?
The yield is significant because we're focused on generating reducing equivalents.
Right.
So for every turn, oxidizing 1 acetyl-CoA, we generate 3 molecules of NADH.
3 NADH.
Yeah. 1 molecule of FADH2 and 1 molecule of ATP, or sometimes GTP, that's generated directly. That's by substrate-level phosphorylation.
And once those cofactors hit the respiratory chain, the numbers really jump.
They really do. We estimate about 2.5 ATP per NADH and 1.5 ATP per FADH2.
So if you do the math.
You do the math, 3 NADH times 2.5, plus 1 FADH2 times 1.5, plus the direct ATP or GTP, you come to a grand total of approximately 10 ATP per turn.
Wow. 10 ATP. That is a massive return, and it really shows why aerobic respiration is just so much more efficient than anaerobic.
Exactly.
That's serious efficiency, truly the powerhouse in action. Okay, let's unpack this step by step. Understanding the actual sequence of reactions, especially where the bottlenecks and inhibitors lie, is so critical.
Let's do it. So step 1, citrate formation. The enzyme is citrate synthase.
And this is where the acetyl-CoA and OAA come together?
They slant together to form citrate. And this reaction is highly exothermic. It releases a massive amount of energy, which makes it essentially irreversible.
A major control point there.
A major control point. It's the final commitment to burning that acetyl-CoA.
Then we get to step 2, isomerization, moving citrate to isocitrate via a kinase. Now, the source mentions a fascinating detail here about symmetry.
Yeah.
It says citrate is chemically symmetrical, yet the enzyme treats it asymmetrically. Why should we care about that?
It's important because of efficiency and tracking. The enzyme, aconitase, ensures that the 2 carbons that are lost as CO2 in the next 2 steps are not the ones that just entered via acetyl-CoA.
Oh, interesting. So it knows which ones to kick out.
It does. They come from the oxaloacetate part of the molecule. This precise asymmetric reaction is due to what's called enzyme channeling. It prevents waste and helps regulate other pathways like fatty acid synthesis, which we'll get to.
And this is where it gets really interesting from a toxicity standpoint. The toxin fluoroacetate.
Right, found in some plants. It's inert until it hits the cycle.
What happens then?
Well, fluoroacetate gets metabolized by citrate synthase into fluorocitrate. And fluorocitrate then acts as a potent suicide inhibitor of aconitase.
It locks up the enzyme.
It locks it up tight. If aconitase is inhibited, citrate accumulates massively and the whole cycle just stops. This inability to proceed past citrate is why fluoroacetate is so deadly.
Speaking of stopping, we now hit our first carbon loss in step 3, the first decarboxylation.
Right. Isocitrate, which is C6, is oxidized and decarboxylated by isocitrate dehydrogenase to form alpha-ketoglutarate, which is C5.
And that's where we get our first CO2.
Our first CO2, and it generates our first NADH. We also need a metal ion cofactor here, magnesium or manganese. This is a major energy gate.
And that leads directly to step 4, the second decarboxylation. This step looks awfully familiar to another key regulatory complex, doesn't it?
It really does. This is where alpha-ketoglutarate C5 is converted to succinyl-CoA C4 by the alpha-ketoglutarate dehydrogenase complex.
And it releases the second CO2 and the second NADH.
Exactly. And you notice the similarity because this complex requires the exact same 5 cofactors as the pyruvate dehydrogenase complex, the one that converts pyruvate to acetyl-CoA.
And those cofactors are derived from B vitamins.
All derived from B vitamins. We're talking thiamine diphosphate, B1, lipoate, NAD+, niacin B3, FAD, riboflavin B2, and coenzyme A, pantothenic acid B5.
Hold on, so the key enzyme complex that runs our aerobic engine needs cofactors from 4 distinct B vitamins. If I'm severely deficient in just B1, my entire body's ability to use sugar and fat for energy is compromised.
Absolutely. The dependence on thiamine is why severe deficiency, like you see in Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, causes such devastating neurological symptoms.
Wow.
If B1 is missing, both PDH and alpha-ketoglutarate dehydrogenase can't function. You're essentially shutting down aerobic respiration across the entire body, especially the brain.
And this complex is also a major target for toxins, right?
It is. The source highlights that it's vulnerable to inhibition by arsenite, which targets the lipocofactor, and crucially, by high concentrations of ammonia.
The ammonia link. Okay, we'll come back to that.
That link is central to understanding liver failure coma.
That brings us to step 5, the substrate-level phosphorylation.
This is the only point where energy is captured directly without going through the electron transport chain. Succinate thiokinase converts succinyl-CoA to succinate.
Both are 4 carbon molecules.
Right, and the energy released from cleaving the thioester bond is harnessed to synthesize 1 molecule of ATP, or, in many tissues, 1 molecule of GTP.
Why the difference between ATP and GTP? Is that regulatory?
It is. The liver and kidney tissues that specialize in making new glucose have an isoenzyme that is specific for GDP. The resulting GTP is then required later to catalyze the key exit step for gluconeogenesis.
That is a brilliant metabolic design. It links the cycle's output directly to the need for glucose synthesis.
It's perfect integration.
Which takes us to the final 3 steps, 6, 7, and 8, dedicated to restoring that 4-carbon vehicle, oxaloacetate.
Exactly. Step 6 is succinate to fumarate, catalyzed by succinate dehydrogenase.
And this enzyme is unique in the cycle.
It is. It's bound directly to the inner mitochondrial membrane, unlike the others which float free in the matrix. It uses FAD, producing our FADH2, which feeds electrons straight into complex 2 of the respiratory chain.
And this is the step that's famously inhibited by malonate.
Yes, which is a structural analog of succinate. Malonate fits perfectly into the enzyme's active site but can't be dehydrogenated, so it's a classic competitive inhibitor.
Okay. And step 7.
Step 7 is straightforward. Fumarase adds water to fumarate to form L-malate.
And finally, step 8, the big regeneration step.
Malate dehydrogenase converts L-malate back to oxaloacetate, and this generates our third and final NADH.
Now, the book mentions this reaction actually strongly favors malating.
It does. Thermodynamically, the equilibrium lies far toward malate. However, because OAA is continuously and so rapidly removed by citrate synthase back in step 1,
The reaction gets pulled forward.
it's constantly being pulled forward. The concentration of OAA in the matrix is kept very, very low, which drives the reaction despite that unfavorable equilibrium.
That full sequence really highlights the cycle's dual role. Now, let's circle back to that crucial concept, amphibolic. The cycle is also a factory.
Right.
So we need to look at how the cycle protects itself from depletion, and then how these intermediates actually exit for synthesis.
We have to talk about anaplerotic reactions that fill up the cycle when intermediates are withdrawn.
Because if we keep drawing OAA out for synthesis, the whole cycle would stall. It runs out of starter fluid.
It would grind to a halt.
So what's the main way the body refills the cycle?
The most important mechanism is the formation of oxaloacetate directly from pyruvate, catalyzed by pyruvate carboxylase.
And the regulation here is just beautiful.
It's elegant and simple. If acetyl-CoA accumulates, it signals that the body has high fuel availability but is running low on its starter molecule, OAA.
So acetyl-CoA itself tells the cell what to do.
It acts as an allosteric activator of pyruvate carboxylase, forcing the creation of more OAA to keep the TCA cycle running.
And what about amino acids?
We see strong links there too. Amino acids like glutamate and glutamine feed directly into the cycle to form alpha-ketoglutarate, while aspartate feeds in to form oxaloacetate.
And these reactions are reversible.
They are, which is key. It means the cycle can also provide the carbon skeletons needed to synthesize those same amino acids when the body needs them.
Okay, now let's discuss the exit strategies, how intermediates leaving the cycle, specifically for making glucose.
Right. Since all intermediates can eventually form oxaloacetate, they are all potentially glucogenic.
They can be used to make new glucose.
Correct. And the key exit door is the conversion of oxaloacetate to phosphenolpyruvate, or PEP. That's catalyzed by phosphenolpyruvate carboxykinase, or PETC.
And we know PPCK requires GTP.
Exactly. Remember the GTP we generated back in step 5 from that special succinate thiokinase isoenzyme?
The one in the liver and kidneys?
That's the one. That GTP is essential for PTCK. This is the ultimate self-regulation. The cycle only releases OAA for glucose production if the activity within the cycle is high enough to generate the required GTP.
It's like the cycle is making sure it has enough money in the bank before authorizing a large withdrawal.
A perfect analogy. It prevents the engine from starving itself of OAA.
That integration is profound. Okay, next up, fatty acid synthesis. Acetyl-CoA is needed for fat creation, but it's a prisoner in the mitochondrial matrix. It can't cross the membrane.
It's stuck. It can't get to the cytosol where fatty acid synthesis occurs.
So how does the cell smuggle it out?
The cell uses a proxy, citrate. When the TCA cycle is running at capacity and gets a little backed up, meaning there's a surplus of acetyl-CoA citrate accumulates,
And that citrate can be transported out.
that citrate is transported out of the mitochondrion and into the cytosol.
So the cell is essentially sending a decoy out of the mitochondrion just so it can strip off the acetyl-CoA, and then has to use a whole other set of reactions just to sneak the leftover piece back in.
That is a perfect way to put it. Once in the cytosol, an enzyme called citrate-lyase cleaves the citrate back into its original components, acetyl-CoA, which is now free for fatty acid synthesis, and oxaloacetate.
What happens to that oxaloacetate in the cytosol?
It starts a crucial recycling loop. It's reduced to malate, and then an enzyme called malic enzyme oxidatively decarboxylates malate back to pyruvate.
And this malic enzyme step does two things.
Two critical things. It generates CO2, and most importantly, it reduces NADP plus to NADPH.
NADPH, which is vital for synthesis.
Correct. This process generates about half of the necessary NADPH for fatty acid synthesis, with the rest coming from the pentose phosphate pathway.
And a pyruvate.
The resulting pyruvate is then transported back into the mitochondrion, where pyruvate carboxylase can convert it back to OAA, completing the shuttle. It's a highly sophisticated, multi-step transport system built entirely around getting two carbons out of a restricted space.
Amazing. Let's finish by synthesizing the control mechanisms, because the source points to a single primary driver for the whole system.
Right. In any tissue focused primarily on energy, the entire TCA cycle is ultimately governed by respiratory control,
Meaning its activity is dependent on the supply of oxidized cofactors.
specifically NAD+. The availability of NAD+ is tied directly to the electron transport chain, which, in turn, depends on the availability of ADP.
So if you're resting,
If you're resting, ATP levels are high and ADP is low. The respiratory chain slows down because there's no ADP to accept the energy.
which means NAD plus isn't regenerated from NADH.
Right, the NADH builds up, and that high NADH and AD plus ratio slams the brakes on the key dehydrogenases of the TCA cycle.
Beyond that big picture, what are the specific enzyme checkpoints?
We have three key gates: citrate synthase, step 1, isocitrate dehydrogenase, step 3, and alpha-ketoglutarate dehydrogenase, step 4.
And high-energy signals like ATP and NADH generally inhibit them.
Yes, signaling the cell is full. As for activation, we see that calcium ions, K2 plus NDA, are key activators for both isocitrate dehydrogenase and alpha-ketoglutarate dehydrogenase.
Why calcium?
Think about it. When you exercise or stimulate secretion, energy demand spikes. Calcium concentration increases inside the cell, and the TCA cycle is immediately activated to meet that demand.
It's an immediate go signal.
Exactly.
Finally, let's return to that critical clinical note: hyperammonemia. This condition, seen in advanced liver disease, causes loss of consciousness and coma. Biochemically, why does high ammonia shut down the central nervous system?
High ammonia is just devastating to the brain because it attacks the TCA cycle in two simultaneous interconnected ways,
Both resulting in reduced ATP.
both resulting in less ATP. First, the brain tries to detoxify the ammonia by synthesizing amino acids. This requires withdrawing large amounts of alpha-ketoglutarate from the cycle to form glutamate and then glutamine.
So by pulling out alpha-ketoglutarate, you deplete all subsequent intermediates.
You drain the cycle, succinate, fumarate, malat, OAA. They all get depleted.
And the second way.
Second, ammonia directly inhibits the alpha-ketoglutarate dehydrogenase complex itself.
Wow, so a double hit.
It's a double hit. The combined depletion of intermediates, the cycle runs out of gas, and the direct inhibition of a key enzyme results in drastically reduced ATP formation in the CNS.
Leading directly to neurological failure, coma, and death. That's a perfect encapsulation of how a seemingly simple chemical imbalance translates directly into systemic failure. To recap our mission, we dove into the TCA cycle, the core engine of aerobic metabolism. Our three most important takeaways are: first, the cycle is the central metabolic hub, the final common pathway for oxidizing all macronutrients via acetyl-CoA.
Right.
Second, it is the most significant single producer of ATP in aerobic respiration, yielding about 10 ATP per turn.
A huge amount.
And third, it is a truly amphibolic pathway, linking metabolism with the vital synthesis of glucose, fatty acids, and amino acids, with specialized shuttle systems to balance those roles.
And here's a final provocative thought for you to consider. Those key choke point enzymes require 4 B vitamins: riboflavin, niacin, thiamin, and pantothenic acid. So think about how a severe deficiency in just one of those essential nutrients can short-circuit the entire aerobic energy production system for every single cell in your body, particularly those in the central nervous system. It really underscores why those vitamins are absolutely essential for maintaining life itself.
A crucial thought indeed. Thank you for engaging in this deep dive with us, and we hope this gave you the clarity and insight you needed to truly master the citric acid cycle.